Britain was falling apart in the 1970s. Strike after strike shut down factories and left shop shelves looking like they'd been looted. Rolling blackouts meant cooking by candlelight became normal. Families had to get creative just to put something warm on the table each night. The food that got people through wasn't fancy, nobody pretended it tasted great, but when your wages couldn't stretch and the electricity kept cutting out, you learned to make do with whatever tins sat at the back of your cupboard. This is about the meals that kept a struggling nation from going hungry. Those flat metal tins of Frey Bentos pie sat in every kitchen. Getting one open felt like a test of willpower. You'd twist that little key around the edge, praying it wouldn't snap off halfway through. The key always felt like it might break. Sometimes it did. Inside was meat sealed up tight, waiting since it left the factory. Steak and kidney or minced beef with onion. When money ran out before Friday came around, that emergency tin got pulled from the cupboard. Shops closed early because of strikes. Families needed backup food. Stick it in the oven and wait. The pastry would puff up and look almost like something you made from scratch. Under that crust sat thick gravy that stuck to your spoon and enough meat to stretch across 6 plates if you added potatoes on the side. Women who cooked these every week knew exactly how long they needed. 40 minutes with the oven on. Take the lid off for the last 10 minutes so the top goes crispy. Kids would press their faces against the oven door, watching the steam build up inside and the pastry turn that golden color. When your house felt like an icebox in January and the heating had packed in, getting a hot pie on the table felt like winning. It wasn't restaurant food, but it was real food when you needed it most. 1 tin of corned beef could feed an entire family if you knew what you were doing. Those tins came with blue labels and a little key stuck to the side. The meat traveled all the way from Argentina because British farms couldn't produce enough. You'd wind that key around and around, watching the metal strip peel back to show the pink pressed meat inside. Chop it up with potatoes and onions, then fry everything together until the edges went brown and crispy. The whole kitchen would fill up with that salty, metallic smell. Kids didn't love it. Dads would ask for brown sauce to cover up the taste. Mums stretched 1 tin as far as it would go because it cost 2 shillings and needed to feed 6 people. Add enough potatoes and you could make it work. Spam fritters took people back to wartime rationing, but they fed 1970s families all the same. Thick slabs of processed pork shoulder got dipped in batter and dropped into hot oil until they turned golden. That smell took over every room. Hot oil mixing with salty meat, the batter would form a crunchy shell that cracked when you bit down. School cafeterias put them on the menu regularly. Shops sold them too. At home, women would heat up deep pans of oil and carefully lower in the battered Spam while children stood nearby waiting. Serve it with chips and baked beans and dinner was sorted. Quick, simple, no hassle. The batter made all the difference. Mix flour and water together, throw in an egg if you had one lying around, make it thick enough to stick to the meat but not so heavy it drowns everything. Some people swore you had to add vinegar to get it extra crispy. However you made it, Spam fritters filled up hungry bellies during years when buying proper meat felt like something only rich families could manage. Findus crispy pancakes showed up in the late 60s but really took over in the 70s. These orange breadcrumb-covered pockets came frozen solid. They had minced beef inside or cheese with onion. 0 prep work required. 20 minutes in the oven and tea was ready to eat. Women working full-time shifts loved how easy they were. Men coming home after 12 hours at work ate them without complaining. Kids would fight over who got to take the first bite, then immediately burn their mouth because the inside was boiling hot. Those cheese ones were the worst for burning your tongue. They'd trick you every single time. Smash instant mashed potato turned powder into something edible faster than you could peel real potatoes. That blue tin with the Cadbury name lived in cupboards everywhere, promising hot mash in just minutes. The TV ads were brilliant.
Martian robots laughing at humans for bothering to peel potatoes? They peel them with their metal knives, boil them for 20 of their minutes, then smash them all to bits. For exhausted women facing another blackout in 1974, those space aliens made a good point. Why waste time on real potatoes when you could just add hot water to powder? It didn't taste like actual potatoes. Bit metallic, definitely odd. But when you'd worked all day, walked into a freezing house and needed food on the table before the lights went out again, smash did the job. Pour it out, stir it up, put it on plates. There were always lumps in it. The texture never felt quite right. But serve it alongside sausages or tinned corned beef and at least the plate looked full. Vesta curries brought exotic flavors from a cardboard box. This was how Britain first tried foreign food, even though it came dried out and needed 20 minutes of boiling water. Beef curry with rice, chicken with crispy noodles on top. It felt fancy during a decade that wasn't fancy at all. Saturday nights meant Vesta night. Women boiled the foil bags while kids sat waiting, imagining they were eating something from another country far away. The actual taste was weird, kinda sweet, slightly spicy, with raisins mixed in. But in 1970s Britain, where Indian restaurants were still unusual and Chinese takeaways were just starting to appear, Vesta felt like trying something new and different.
Those crispy noodles were everyone's favorite part. They stayed crunchy even after you poured curry all over them. Kids fought over getting more of them. The rice was disappointing by comparison, usually sticky and clumped together. Still, Vesta meant experiencing new flavors even when money was tight and options were limited. Liver and onions was tough for kids to stomach, but it kept families fed without costing much. Offal still appeared on menus throughout the 70s because it was dirt cheap. A pound of lamb's liver cost a fraction of what decent cuts did, making it essential eating during winter when wages didn't stretch far. Women would slice it thin and fry it up with huge amounts of onions until everything went soft together. That sharp, metallic smell was impossible to ignore. It filled every corner of the house. Kids pushed it around their plates, nearly gagging on the texture. Dads insisted it was good for your blood. That's what people always said about food nobody actually wanted to eat. Cauliflower cheese became the main meal when meat was too expensive or unavailable. One whole cauliflower boiled until it went soft, then covered completely in thick cheddar sauce. This wasn't a side dish, this was dinner, served with boiled potatoes and maybe bread to soak up the sauce. Making the cheese sauce took some care. You needed flour, margarine, milk, and as much grated cheddar as you could spare. Some women threw in mustard powder to give it some extra flavor. Either way, it turned cheap vegetables into something that actually filled you up. Toad in the Hole made a few sausages stretch further than they should. Basic sausages that had more cereal filler than actual meat sat in batter that puffed up and went crispy around them. Yorkshire pudding batter was cheap to make, just flour, eggs, and milk. The sausages provided barely enough meat to make it feel like a real dinner. Women who cooked this all the time knew the trick. Get the fat smoking hot before you pour the batter in. That sizzle meant you'd done it right. The edges would crisp up immediately, while the middle stayed soft and perfect for soaking up onion gravy. Kids always wanted the corner pieces. Dads got first pick of the sausages. Lancashire hot pot carried northern tradition through 70s winters. Layers of sliced potato and onion with chunks of mutton baked slowly until the top went crispy and the liquid underneath turned rich and flavorful. Mutton cost less than lamb. It was fattier and tougher too, but hours sitting in the oven changed it completely. In mill towns where wages dropped and jobs disappeared, hot pot meant home cooking. Every family made it slightly differently. Some threw in carrots, others kept it simple with just potato, onion, and meat. The top layer of potatoes, sliced thin and arranged overlapping, turned golden and crispy.
Everything underneath melted together into one dish. Hot Pot went into the oven first thing in the morning and came out at tea time. The smell filled the house all day long. On nights when the electricity stayed on long enough to finish cooking it properly, that felt like a small victory.
Mince and tatties ruled Scottish and northern dinner tables. Cheap minced beef cooked with onions and carrots, served with mountains of mashed potato. You'd make a little well in the middle of the mash to hold the gravy. Kids would guard that pool of gravy until the very last bite. The mince never had much actual meat in it, mostly vegetables, sometimes bulked out with pearl barley when times got especially hard. But the gravy was rich and there were always plenty of potatoes. Simple, cheap, filling. Bread and dripping was what got eaten when absolutely nothing else was available. Fat from Sunday's roast cooled down and spread thick on white bread, sometimes with salt added, sometimes just as it was. For loads of families, this was Monday's tea. The bread was thick sliced mother's pride or sun blessed. The dripping came from the roasting pan, scraped out and saved, because throwing away fat would be wasteful. Kids remembered that pale, congealed layer cracking slightly when you cut through it with a knife, leaving behind a salty taste that reminded you of meat, even though there wasn't any actual meat left. Fish finger sandwiches solved the problem of being too exhausted to properly cook. 4 fish fingers, either grilled or fried, stuck between 2 slices of thick white bread. The bread needed to be soft enough to squash around the hot fish fingers, butter melting into the ketchup until everything was warm and salty. Nobody really talked about it as a proper meal, but it was tea sorted. No fuss involved, no long wait, and it kept people fed across Britain. Bubble and squeak turned Monday's leftovers into Tuesday's dinner. Cold potatoes and cabbage from Sunday's roast, mashed together and fried until the edges went brown and crispy. The smell of boiled cabbage took over kitchens. Kids hated everything about it. The cabbage was the absolute worst part. Dads liked the crispy bits though. Mums needed to use every last scrap of food. During the 70s, when shortages meant planning meals carefully, throwing away leftovers made 0 sense. Semolina with jam was a school dinner that somehow found its way into homes too. This milky, grainy pudding came out steaming with a blob of strawberry jam dropped in the centre. Kids mixed it slowly, watching the red and white swirl together before taking that first spoonful. The texture split people straight down the middle. Some found it comforting and warm, others couldn't stand how grainy it felt. But semolina was cheap, it filled you up, and it used milk before it spoiled. Hot pudding meant warmth when houses were absolutely freezing. Women made it when the weather turned brutal, and kids came home frozen solid. The jam made it bearable to eat. Without that jam, semolina was nearly impossible to get down. With it, at least there was something sweet. Angel Delight changed dessert for working families across Britain. Powder whisked together with milk turned into fluffy mousse within minutes. Strawberry flavour was everyone's favourite. Butterscotch, split opinions, but all of it felt like a treat when most puddings required actual cooking time.
The whisking was half the entertainment. Kids watched their mums work the powder and milk together, seeing the mixture get thicker. Then came the waiting while it set in the fridge. Those 5 minutes felt like forever when you were hungry for something sweet. The first spoonful was always taken too soon, still a bit liquid. Nobody cared though. Arctic Roll combined sponge cake and ice cream into something surprisingly good. A cylinder of vanilla ice cream wrapped in jam and sponge, sliced into rounds that were both soft and cold at the same time. Not every home had freezers in the early 70s, but by halfway through the decade, most families had them. Serving Arctic Roll needed good timing. Take it out too early and it melted everywhere. Too late and you couldn't slice through it. That perfect moment didn't last long. Kids got the biggest slices, adults took whatever remained. In homes where pudding usually meant rice or semolina, Arctic Roll felt genuinely special. Tinned pears with evaporated milk was how you did Sunday tea properly. The pears came sitting in syrup, soft and sweet. Evaporated milk poured out thick from carnation tins, turning it into something that felt fancier than it actually was, even though it cost almost nothing. Women served it in glass bowls when they had them, making Sunday tea feel like something worth looking forward to. The pears were slippery, syrup collected at the bottom. The evaporated milk looked like real cream. No fresh fruit needed, just tins waiting in the cupboard for Sundays when the week's hard work was finally done. Which of these foods brings back memories for you? Drop your stories in the comments about those freezing kitchens lit by candles, waiting for the electricity to come back on.